Hey, welcome to Hot Takes. I'm your host, James Scott, here to analyze anything and everything interesting. Let's dig into today's topics.
Well, it kind of feels like this is I want to say the end of an era, but it's not the end of an era. It's just the end of divisional breakdowns. But before we even get started, James, do us all a favor. Tell us what's hot this week.
Well, we're seeing some people come back from day-to-day injuries. I think that's really helping my fantasy team, but nobody really cares about that. So, no, I think there it is a very typical week for baseball this time of the year. A lot of people worried about the Yankees. I'm not. Like I said on this podcast before, people who are switch hitters, people who are swing speed guys, they don't typically do well until the second half of the season or later on into the season. The Yankees are just chock full of swing speed guys, and then on top of that, they have Hicks, who's a switch hitter. So, not too worried. The Blue Jays are doing exactly like I thought they would. Performing, exactly like I thought. There's a couple of guys on the team who are well exceeding my expectations for sure. But as a whole, they're doing exactly what I thought they would do. The Royals have been great, but it's very early on, and I don't think the Twins have gotten going. They have a lot of bat speed guys. They've also started the year in the National League, so Cruz hadn't really gotten going. And then Cruz was day to day for a minute. Buxton was day to day for a minute. Simmons currently has COVID. I think a lot of things have kind of stalled the Twins early on in the season. Indians have looked interesting, but I don't think that they were ever thought to be in competition for the division. But the White Sox, quite a few players on them are bat speed guys. Quite a few players. Moncada's a switch hitter. Quite a few players on their team are either rookies or guys entering their second year. And so it's one of those types of things where the Eloy Jimenez is now hurt, so that hurts their lineup. But I do expect the White Sox to continue to heat up. Moncada's heated up recently a little bit. Robert's slowly gathering himself. Like it seemed like it was a single almost every single game early on in the year, and now he's having a couple of big games, so he's starting to get his stuff together. Tim Anderson was hurt. Now Tim Anderson's back, and he's doing a lot better than he did before the injury. So I do think the White Sox are going to be picking it up. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think the Royals are a fourth place team. I think that, the Indians, because they design their lineup lefty righty the way that Tampa Bay does, but they do so with a lot more speed. And because they have the pitching, the staff that they have, bullpen, rotation, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Royals over the course of a full year to succeed. I think a lot of their guys have also got up to hot starts that are unsustainable. Michael Taylor was probably the big one. Everybody's like, oh, but Michael Taylor, he's going to be the next Lorenzo Cain. Lorenzo Cain started with a hit tool. Taylor's never had a hit tool. Just because you're looking at a guy who, has I'm sorry to say, baseball. A lot of baseball fans, they when they compare players, they look at visuals. Just because he is the same complexion and size as Lorenzo Cain does not mean that he is Lorenzo Cain. Just because he's playing the same position and he's also fast does not mean that he's the fine-tuned swing that Lorenzo Cain did have as he developed as a hitter for Kansas City. He developed literally in front of the major league guys because he developed at the big league level. But Taylor's been at the big league level for years. He's never knocked down that strikeout rate. So the Royals definitely doing well right now, but it's early. I think the Astros are making adjustments so that they can try and remain a very good team, but I don't think that they have the pitching to do it. I don't think those adjustments will hold up over a full year. They deserve any sort of bad luck that's coming to them. I'll just get that little Astros moment out of the way for our podcast, Chris.
It just doesn't end.
Never will.
Come on.
I mean, the Mets have had a couple of injuries, with Carrasco. He needs to come back. When Carrasco and Syndergaard come back, and as we move on in the season, and Lindor's a switch hitter, and Alonso's got ridiculous bat speed. Same thing with Conforto, but Conforto's actually been historically a first half guy. What's interesting about Conforto, though, is because when you see a guy who's like Conforto, patient bat, right? First half guy typically. They know that they're historically a first half guy and they have the physicality to hold up over a full season. So while they are in their prime, they can turn that first half into being more of a second half player by just holding their own on a level that they held in the offseason for the first half, and then really pushing at the second half, and then being really in season shape for the second half. And that's, when they have those types of years. Gardner did that, I think 2-3 years ago. He's historically a first half guy. So I think that we could see a flip for Conforto this year, because I do think he's got pretty good bat speed for a lefty, at least for a patient lefty. And I think that that's a team that as they make adjustments and people get healthy as the season goes on, they'll definitely do better. They don't have very many holes, so any sort of trades at the trade deadline are really going to impact the team on a real level, because it's not like they'll be straining to put people in the right spots. The Braves have signed. Yeah, look, the Braves, they brought in Pablo Sandoval, okay, during like way late in the offseason, right? They brought in Ender and CR. Well, I won't say they brought in. They brought him in years ago, okay, but they kept him. They kept Ender and Ciarte despite all the guys that they had in organization, okay? They went out, they got Orlando Arcia, right? They have Shea Langeliers and William Contreras, which is Wilson Contreras' younger brother, in the high minors for them, just in case something goes wrong with Travis d'Arnaud, who's now having a really rough start to the season. I really was hoping that he had turned the corner, given that he's usually healthy for about 90, 100 games. But it's starting to look like he's a hot and cold player who has trouble staying healthy for 100 games. It's not even like he turned a corner and now he's a good hitter. No, he's just hot and cold. When he's hot, he's awesome. But like, if you're hot and cold and you're injury prone, like my dude, you're probably best used as a backup catcher or a DH or first baseman, something that'll keep you healthier, like something to mitigate this. And it's likely that by the end of the season, Shea Langeliers, probably Langiers, right? Yeah, I don't want to. I probably completely am butchering it, but it's very good.
I have heard Langiers. I have heard.
Thank you. Yeah, he's a guy who's got power. He was a college bat. He's got the defense for the position. So I don't really necessarily doubt that he could hold his own, especially with the league not knowing him. It helps having lineup protection, but it's also a position where you don't really need to hit that much if you're doing the defensive, skills. It's just interesting to me looking at the Braves, because like, why go get Arcia? Why do that? He's a guy who should be playing every day. Do you have a trade lined up for one of your infielders? How are you going to get him enough playing time? I mean, a lot of questions that are concerning, but also looking at the other side, like this team has so much depth. Arcia should play every day. With the way that Sandoval's hitting, I wouldn't mind playing him against righties, which is almost every day. You need to get Riley, though, at bats, because Riley needs to develop. He's big league ready. He dropped his strikeout rate a lot last year. With his bat speed, probably a bit better in the second half once he's gotten like 200 at bats under his belt. But I don't know how you're going to get all those at bats. Maybe you move him around or something, but the Braves are going to have to figure that out on their own. Inciarte's been fantastic. No power, which was kind of expected, but good batting average, good on base percentage, and he's one of the best defenders in the entire sport. So the Braves are evolving. Max Fried went on the DL. I don't know if he's off, but I know Smiley came off the DL. So Smiley's back for them. They put Kyle Wright in the rotation last time I checked, who's another prospect who was trying to figure out a couple things for them. So I'm not super worried about any of their rotation concerns right now, although that could develop over a full season, so that's worth monitoring. But yeah, so the Braves are looking all right. Cardinals started very hot and then predictably got very cold. They're not a first half team. I've said this year before. They're going to make their push in the second half. Cubs have been awful, but if you're looking at their team position to position, like Bryant's a bat speed guy. Even though he's been pretty decent as the season started, he's going to be more of a second half guy. Rizzo's a very patient hitter. He's going to be about as good as he can be, but he's also been in a very subtle decline the last few years. It's very hard to observe. You have to be looking at the right things in order to see it. He's still going to walk, still going to hit for doubles power, and probably late in the season, he'll be his old self for a couple of months. But he's got to have a lot of at bats under his belt to get to that point. Horner has not proved himself at the big league level. Baez is going through his approach adjustment phase of his career, where he's going from being aggressive and being successful with, almost a too aggressive approach. And now it is a too aggressive approach. So he has to dial the swing in, start to swing only at strikes and pitches around the zone, start to differentiate a little bit better. I mean, it's not like he couldn't before. It's just that approach worked for him. So now he's going through the transition. Moncada, same deal. Sanchez, same deal. Come out the other side. They're going to produce outstanding numbers. But right now, especially early in the season, when you're going through that transition, it's going to be a little rough. Contreras is doing good. So that's good to see as well. He seems like a guy to me that should be fairly consistent, though. But, if you're looking at a V-swing guy like Hayward, who's bigger on the bigger side, he's going to be more coordinated and more able to hit the ball properly when the second half comes around. You look at Ian Happ. Ian Happ is a switch hitter. You look at Jock Peterson, who adjusts his swing like 5 times every single year and who has never played against righties and lefties. Now he's playing against righties and lefties. That's a big adjustment for him. So now you have almost everyone in the Cubs lineup not hitting. So that's why they've been terrible, but they'll come around. Padres have been super exciting. Dodgers have been the Dodgers, typical Dodgers. But I love to see how exciting the Padres have been. That's been really fun to watch. I mean, watching Mateo on that team, knowing his speed, like even if he's not hitting a lot or regularly, just knowing that like at some point in the lineup, when you get to the weaker hitters, he's going to come up knowing what he can do on the bases. I mean, he's not the smartest guy in terms of baseball IQ. That's at least what the scouts say. But he might be the fastest guy. I mean, like I watched this guy when he was in the minor leagues. Billy Hamilton, at one point, he ran, I think it was 14 seconds around the bases, something along those lines. And may have been like 15 seconds around the bases. Billy Hamilton was a lefty doing that. He's a switch hitter, but that specific, inside the park home run that he ran, that was like that fast. He was running as a lefty. Mateo's a righty. He doesn't have the ability to switch hit. He doesn't have that extra couple steps from being in that batter's box. And I've seen him beat Hamilton around the bases for an inside the park homer. That's insane speed. If you make Billy Hamilton like look clearly slower than you, that's Billy Hamilton, So no, the Padres have been super fun to watch, and knowing that Tatis is now not out for the year. I compared his injury to Jeter's injury. I think it was back in 2003, 2005, one of those. He missed like a few games. He ended up playing 119 that season. He actually dislocated his shoulder completely, I believe, on a slide into third base. I believe it was in Toronto. I think it was opening day. My memory, I hope I'm right. If I am right, then goodness gracious, my memory, right? But
oh my God.
Yeah, they got Machado, they got Hosmer, they got Myers, they got a good team. Padres got a good team. Very exciting team. So I guess that's my updates, just around the league, just a quick little picture about things, Outside of that, everybody's kind of performed normally. The Nationals have gotten hurt, been hit by COVID at the same time. They've had some like really, rough performances by people coming back. Like, I don't think the Nationals have showed who they are, but the thing is, because Scherzer is on a 1-year deal, if they get too far out of the race in the National League East, the hardest division in baseball, I've seen, rumors that they'd want to trade him. I mean, I don't think they're going to be able to resign him after the year, so I understand that, but then they're really at a disadvantage for the playoff picture. Excuse me. So I think that, I think that the Nationals definitely need to be watched over the next couple of weeks, because if they don't start putting things together, Yeah, Scherzer could be marketed, very reasonably be marketed. But a lot of the players on the Nationals have done really well. Kind of overachieved expectations, like Josh Harrison, Yan Gomes. If you see like Starling Castro heat up, and Turner keeps doing his thing, Soto comes back from his injury, and then Bell, he's a switch hitter. He's been terrible, but he's also always been hot and cold. And when he heats up, he's really, really good. So later on in the season, that should help them out. Maybe Kyle Schwarber keeps making adjustments. He needs to start learning to clear his front leg. A lot of his power is from his midsection. And if he doesn't clear his front leg, he's going to completely limit himself to the strength that he has, like in the lower parts of his leg and in his hips. And I think he closes himself off. I think it stops him from being able to rotate on certain balls. I think if he learns how to work his front leg properly with hitting, get the timing down with it, I don't think there's very much he can't do in the box. But once again, I don't know why this guy, still wants to play the outfield as badly as he does. I think he should be a DH. I think he should focus on that. And if not, he should be a first baseman. And I don't think there's really any sort of justification for keeping him in the outfield. It's going to keep him, working on being fleet of foot instead of sure of, planting, sure of foot strike, if you will. From what I see at the plate, he's doing too much. He's moving way too much now. And the process needs to be simplified if it's going to ever be effective at the levels that it could be at the big league level. But he's got such amazing hitting talent that I think it can come together. It's just hard to imagine why a team would look at him and be like, oh yeah, we'll keep him working on the skills that'll make him a bad hitter and like a mediocre defender. Well, then you have a very average player, or sometimes possibly even below average. I don't get it. I'd put him at first base or DH and leave him there. He probably just doesn't want to do that. Probably likes playing the outfield too much. I mean, he has gotten a lot better at playing it, but that doesn't say much. He was one of the worst, if not the worst, right there with like Nick Castellanos, right? And now he's slightly below average to below average. And that's a big leap, but do I think that like now he's going to go from there to being one of the best defenders in the league that justifies him being like a 15% above league average hitter? No, that's not going to happen. You're not going to make Kyle Schwarber a speedster. Like that's no. And I think you're destroying his body type by the longer you keep him out there, the longer you get him away from working on hitting. So that's my 2 cents. But anyway, let's jump into our last divisional breakdown. I'm down.
Let's do it.
Let's get it.
Do it. So you said for this final divisional breakdown, we are doing both
the West.
Yep, the West. What team do you want to start with before I reveal?
The AL West.
Okay.
So, last time we had to bring up, the Astros and, trash on them, the trash throws, just, rag on them again, so we're on to a team that I think is finally going to get ahead of them and should have gotten ahead of them for quite a few years. Because, they don't cheat. No, really though. The reason why they should have gotten ahead of them is because they have Mike Trout, and point blank, Mike Trout needs to be in the playoffs. I don't care about you, Seattle Mariners. Sorry, you guys can take a break from the playoffs. I don't care about you, Rangers. Take a break from the playoffs. You don't have a historical talent. Astros can take a break forever. Oakland, your Moneyball thing, that was fun while it lasted. Now let Trout into the playoffs. That's not how it works, of course. But no, I mean, Trout is like the greatest player I've ever seen. Era dependent. He's probably the best player of all time. You take another player out of a different era, you put them into our era, they're not going to do nearly as well. So, no, I just think it's a crime that we haven't seen Trout in the playoffs. So now we have the Angels. They're looking like the team to win the division this year. So far, we are a little bit of ways into the season. Not really a little bit of ways. We're like, what, 3 weeks? That's like still next to nothing. But the Angels pitching has performed just as I thought it would. Canning has been very good. Heaney has been very good. Otani's been Otani. Bundy's Bundy. Like they do have a good staff, not a great staff, but a good staff. And that's what they've been looking for years on it. They've been looking for a staff that could allow their amazing offense to compete. Now, I've not thought of the Angels offense is that amazing personally, because yes, it's got Trout, it's got a few other big guys, but it was always a half of an offense. Well, this year they don't have half of an offense anymore. It's actually a very well-rounded team if you break it out, Yes, Buttrey retired, so they do have some need in the bullpen. The bullpen is one of the easiest positions to build on the fly. And plus, late in the season, if you have guys who come up and, end up adding onto your rotation, you can always bump the worst in the rotation to the bullpen. And I think that works specifically for the Angels because they have like a bunch of starters. Okay. They have Bundy, they have Otani, they have Canning, they have Cobb, they have Heaney, they have Quintana. That's 6. I feel like I'm missing out on one. I think well, I mean, Sandoval, but I don't really like him too much. So I really view him more as a pen guy. But those are 6 guys. But more specifically, I want to bring the attention to Quintana, who's a 2-pitch starter. His whole career, he's been a 2-pitch starter. And when you go to the bullpen, your fastball velocity can increase. And the reason why Quintana stopped being an ace was his fastball velocity dropped. And as a 2-pitch pitcher who's really dependent on the differential between his fastball and I believe his changeup, his changeup lost effectiveness. He stopped being a good pitcher. You put him in the bullpen, especially as a starter who's used to going full games, he can go 2 innings at a time. He can increase his velocity, for short periods. And that creates the difference that you need for the changeup to be effective. So now he's performing as an ace for you in your bullpen for multiple innings. I think that this is a strategy that not a lot of teams do enough, taking guys who are starters that are near the end, putting them in the bullpen, giving them a chance to rewrite the end of their career. We used to do it. Big league teams used to do it. John Smoltz, remember that, right? That's how things used to be done. If you couldn't stay as a plus starter, move you to the bullpen, see how that works. And sometimes it worked really well. I think, we talk about great pitchers for different eras. King Felix Hernandez has been one of the best pitchers. Well, not recently, but when he was good for like 10 years, 12 years, something like that. Just dominant. ERAs in the 2s, tons of strikeouts, lots of weak contact, didn't walk people. And I think that's really the main thing. He pitched a lot of innings, low ERA, didn't walk people, lots of weak contact. Because he did have a period of time where he struck guys out, but once he realized that he didn't have to strike guys out to get guys out, I think, he went on just no walks, lots of weak contact, lots of innings. But then his fastball velocity faded because he threw so many innings at such a young age. I think if you put Felix Hernandez in the bullpen, you're like, yo, be a setup man. If you do well enough, you're a closer. He could be the next John Smoltz. I think he could absolutely up the fastball velocity enough to have 4 more good years out of the pen. I mean, if you're thinking about him and being like, oh, he's borderline Hall of Fame, that makes him Hall of Fame. If you're a closer for 3 out of 4 years for the end of your career, and a reliever for the end 4 years, and those years you have an ERA of 2, 2.5, 3.2, and 3.6. Decline, sure, but with his career, you add that onto it, he's a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt. But teams don't really like to think about things this way. I don't know why. Brett Anderson would make another great pick for the bullpen. Edinson Volquez, if you introduce him to the bullpen in the right way, you can't put him in high leverage situations. You can't put him in multi-inning situations. You got to bring him in when nobody's on base and you have a lead. And you just pitch him 1 inning. And then once he gets his confidence and he's, really on a roll with those 1 inning appearances, then you bring him in maybe with a guy on first base and see how he does, But you start no pressure where he can just, stuff a guy to death, breaking ball, fastball, and all that. And he's always had a lot of movement. And I felt like he's picture perfect reliever. But teams aren't really thinking about things this way. So anyway, to jump back to the Angels, they do need to fix up the bullpen a little bit, but Quintana, I think, will help. I think a guy like Patrick Sandoval can definitely help. That's the starter that I was forgetting. If Reed Detmers ends up coming up at the end of the season, which people have said, he's near big league ready. He came out of the draft near big league ready. That could bump even Alex Cobb to the bullpen. So then you have another guy joining the bullpen who, is a former starter who's starting to tail off because of the stuff. Well, in the bullpen, ramping things up, it's back. So, and then also it's worth mentioning that Alex Cobb's underlying statistics are actually really, really good. So it might not be Alex Cobb. It might not end up being him. Maybe, Ohtani reaches his innings limit and you want to keep him fresh for the playoffs. So you move Ohtani to the bullpen for the end of the season. And then, in the playoffs, you move him back to the rotation and he's fresh, and that can get you just finish the season strong with the bullpen and still have enough guys giving you a chance to win every single day that you get your wins off that offense. Point is that there's ways of navigating this. There's ways of getting guys at the deadline, moving players around based on their roster, promoting guys. Now there is a little bit, that has to depend on, hopefully Reed Detmers is ready. But if he isn't, you trade for a guy. Hopefully, Quintana can do great in the playoffs. I actually think that's looking at the facts of the matter. He can do better in the bullpen. But with Cobb, that's more up in the air. Can Cobb be a good reliever? Will Ohtani be able to last the season? So there are concerns, right? But when you look at the other teams in the division, the other teams have many more concerns. Or if they don't have specific holes in their roster, they don't have specific strengths. Like I say specifically with Oakland, like their strength is that they have a really good rotation. But everything else is very plain. Can't, okay, so you have a really good rotation, so, whereas this team, they have an elite defense. They have elite lineup balance in terms of approaches and strengths. They have a rotation that leaks into the bullpen and can upgrade the bullpen. The roles that in the bullpen are being upgraded aren't the same roles that you would be targeting for a trade at the trade deadline, meaning whichever guy you do get at the deadline fits into their role perfectly. Meaning like most of the guys who go multiple innings aren't going to really be your fireman. They're going to be a guy that you use for multiple innings, like to bridge gaps between you and the setup man or you and the closer or, things like that, right? You don't want to use a guy who can go multiple innings to put out a fire in one inning. That's a waste of a talent because you don't know the next day you might, have the starting pitcher get out of the game in the sixth inning and you need that 2 innings right there, So fireman slots in, when the fire needs to be put out, game on the line, runner on second, tie game, whatever. That's when you bring in your fireman. So that's going to really boost their bullpen as well. And then they have, that amazing offense starting with Trout. Now, I do really want to start by addressing this offense. So we've mainly been talking about why I'm confident in their pitching. They got like Tony Watson back there. They got, I believe, Steve Cishek as well back in the bullpen. They have him. They have a couple of other guys. That's right, Iglesias. They have a closer, and Myers also had an incredible year last season, so he might be, an elite reliever in his own right. So they do have something to build around bullpen wise as well. But let's move on very quickly from their rotation and pitching staff, because I'll be real with you, like I could keep talking about that all day, given how much of an issue it was in the past for them and how big it is for them right now. Well, I won't say big because it's not really a massive strength, but it's clearly something that is a plus. It's clearly something that can be worked with. It's clearly something that if you make one move or two moves, you're able to compete with anyone else, given the makeup of the rest of your team. And that's been such an issue for the Angels for so long. that I could actually talk about, the ways they've upgraded individually from previous years, the way Heaney's gotten better, the way that Canning's gotten better, what's happened with Dylan Bundy and how he's not the same guy he was with Baltimore. But we need to talk about this offense. This is the big part of this is the strength of the team, so to speak. The position player group. Okay. They have Kurt Suzuki, so they finally have a reliable offensive catcher. He's also one of the most intelligent catchers in the game. He created the plan. I think we've talked about this before. He created the plan that actually defeated the Astros cheating scandal in the 2019 World Series. So he's on another level. He's outthinking you. He's 2 steps ahead of you. He's like, oh, well, we're putting down the sign for a slider here, right? So they're going to say that a slider's coming. So let's reverse it. So it's a fastball. And then the next time we're going to make it seem like we've reversed it again, but it's the same. But they're going to think this. So imagine like the second at bat, the third at bat, trying to stay ahead of these hitters who know what the normal pitch is coming. He was able to develop a system that out-thunk the Astros hitters. Like that's some 2,000, 3,000 IQ, eyes light up, internet stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so big props to Kurt Suzuki. He's now the Angels catcher. They have Max Stassi, who I believe he also was on the Astros recently. So maybe he's going to be able to give away some extra secrets on how to beat the Astros if they continue their cheating ways in that division against them. It just can't be, I'm serious. It can't be a coincidence that they have Max Stassi as the backup catcher, former Astro, and Kurt Suzuki, the guy who defeated the Astros, at catcher, a position that's so key with winning, with calling pitches, with conducting, okay, well, if this happens and this pitch is thrown and we get a ground ball, we're going to specifically get a ground ball from this pitcher this way in the infield. So we're going to have the infield now shift that way. Like, there's no way that having this combination of catchers has nothing to do with the Astros. I think this is just to make sure that they stay not cheating, because you have a guy from the team from those years in Stassi, and you have a guy like Kurt Suzuki who defeated them, and that's your combination. So that's cool, and I just think that should be noted. Getting to the infield. Now, Kurt Suzuki, like we said, he's a very smart catcher, so they should have good defense at catcher, even if it's not the greatest at throwing runners out. Kurt Suzuki's not the greatest at that. At first base, Pujols is there. He started hot. I think he knows that this is kind of the end, and he's fighting for his spot right now. He has a bunch of lineup protection, so I do understand why he's having success on balls in play, and while he's walking as much as he is. I do not think it's sustainable. Old man Pujols is like maybe 45 years old, something like that. There's rumors that he lied about his age, but like no one really cares because he's the machine. He's a Hall of Famer. He might be the best first baseman of all time. Who cares about the fact that you might be 2 years older than you are if you put up those numbers at the big leagues? So, hat tip to Pujols. But I fully expect that he's going to be in a platoon later in the year when he starts cooling off with Jared Walsh. The league doesn't really know Walsh that well. Walsh, when the league does get to know him, is not going to be able to do what he's able to do right now. But right now, he's hitting for a pretty decent level of home run power. Lefty. It's going to work well in a platoon with Pujols. Also, it's going to work well defensively. I think that's another thing that's worth noting. He should be a pretty defensive option at first base. Talking about things defensively, across the infield, they have David Fletcher, Jose Iglesias, and Anthony Rendon. Anthony Rendon's a well above average defensive third baseman. There's no doubt about that. He's not elite, but he's well above average. You have Jose Iglesias, who's an elite shortstop. You have Fletcher, who's an elite second baseman. I think that combination, double play-wise, is the best in baseball. I think that's shortstop, second base, defensive combination there. Yeah, best in MLB. Excuse me, a lot of burps today. Goodness. Fletcher and Iglesias, though, they're mainly singles hitters. These are not guys that are gonna, particularly hit the ball out a lot. They're gonna spray the ball around the field. They're gonna bat above 280, maybe bat above 300. We'll see. As the rest of the team starts to heat up, the year goes on. We'll see as they start getting better pitches to hit how good they'll end up hitting. I see them both as mainly like doubles hitters, singles hitters. But guys who can get those hits at a high frequency, which moves the action along, especially helps if you have a faster team, which it doesn't look like the Angels have a faster team. They actually do. Walsh is well above average foot speed for a first baseman. Fletcher is a very fast player, first to third type. Iglesias also is a first to third type. You don't have to steal bases to be considered a fast player. If you're a first to third guy and you're able to put up a high BSR, then that's putting up base running value for me. Now you have to, of course, weigh how much they are getting on base against their BSR value, because there are guys who don't get on base very much with insane BSRs, where if you can find ways to get them to get on base more, like imagine how good their BSRs would get. But nonetheless, you're looking at a team, Rendon, he typically runs very high BSRs, very intelligent base runner, very first to third, tag ups. He does all that he has to do. Trout, Upton, by the way, has higher BSRs than most people expect on a year-to-year basis, because he's a bigger guy and he's not a great defender, but he's actually really fast on the bases. It's just not, first step speed. It's fifth step speed. It's a first to third, second to home type thing. And then, of course, Joe Adell, Brandon Marsh, people who are going to come up and end up taking at bats from the injured Dexter Fowler. He's out now, like basically for the whole year. Both of them are extraordinarily fast players as well. So you're looking at a very fast roster. So Iglesias and Fletcher, the singles that they hit, the team's going to be able to maximize. It's going to be lots of small ball, sure, but it's not like this team's not capable of big ball. And that's where it gets interesting. Rendon's one of the best hitters in the game. He's a 300, 400, 500 hitter. Batting average, on base percentage, slugging, typically 30, 40% above league average per WRC plus. Great BSRs on a year-to-year basis. So across the board, there's nothing that he really does wrong at the plate. So he's true middle of the order. Ohtani is about as true middle of the order as you get for a lefty in a shift era, ridiculous power, walks, can run the bases like a madman, probably going to bat about 275, 280, but that's because of the shift. Without the shift, that's 310. Okay. So, you're looking at Ohtani as like a real force there too, because he's getting on base. He's hitting for power. He's getting on base from hits. He's running the bases. And I think he's going to be a great first to third guy on the bases, but I do think that power level, people aren't really even fully awoken to how much power the guy has. Like a full season of at bats, I could see Ohtani hitting like 45 homers, like actually, which is like when you look at the rest of his skills, okay. So he's going to bat 285. He's going to, walk enough that he's going to have like a 13% walk rate, right? He's going to hit 45 home runs. He's going to then be getting on base somewhere around like a 390 clip, 380 clip. Ohtani's amazing. Point is, Ohtani, we could be talking about Ohtani all day. I say Trout's going to put up the most value for you in baseball. He's the best player in baseball. But the person in baseball who's doing the hardest skill is Ohtani, because he's an ace pitcher, lefty throwing as hard as he does, who can run the bases like he can and who can hit like he can. No one else in baseball is doing that skill set, and hasn't for 100 years. So yeah, that's Ohtani. But then they also have, when Upton's hot, he's a very hot and cold player. He's about as good as any sort of middle of the order hitter. And then there's Trout. So you're looking at a team that is very powerful, but you're also looking at a team that's going to put a lot of balls in play. You're also looking at a team that's going to run a lot, and they're just going to get hotter as the year goes on, because Kurt Suzuki is that type of guy where he needs lineup protection to hit for homer power. And Trout's a guy where as the season goes on, he just gets better and better and better. That's just who he is. But more specifically, when Upton's going through a period of time where he's not hitting, he's an auto out. So once he joins the fray, if you will, and the prospects in right field end up contributing, I think you're looking at a 1 through 9 lineup. I think, you're going to start seeing more power hit from Kurt Suzuki, from Jose Iglesias, from David Fletcher. I think that, Trout's never been in a situation where he's going to see as many pitches to hit as he's going to in this situation. So does the team have, lefty bats? Yes. It depends on if they want to go with Marsh or not in left field or right field, but they do have Ohtani. Okay. And you don't want to go with too many lefties in this era because you also have Walsh, who's going to be platooning. You don't want to be going with too many more than 2 or 3 because the shift era, too many double plays. But you need enough to diversify things. So they have that going for them. They have the lefties going for them. They have patient hitters going for them. They have hot and cold hitters going for them. They have singles hitters going for them. They have home run hitters going for them. So they first to third base running. They have stolen base guys too. They have rookies. They have guys at the end of their career. They have guys in the middle of their career. They have guys at the end of their prime trying to just get a championship. Upton, it's the most perfectly balanced lineup, like for just this season. Once everything's clicking, because everybody has their own reason to have a chip on their shoulder and perform. So that's the Angels. And I think that if I'm going to bring up anything else about this team, because we do got to really cover our last team because we're starting to go a little too long here. I think I got to bring up that Luis Rengifo was rushed through the minors. He can play basically every single position. He's a switch hitter. As the year goes on, like I said, switch hitters heat up. If he can get both swings in order, he's a guy who can hit like 15 home runs and steal 30 bases for you. Like he actually has that type of ability. Now, can he hit for a pretty high batting average? I don't think he's going to hit for more than like 250. But as a guy who can play a lot of different positions, who will walk and hit for pull power, and who, when he does get on base, is capable of stealing, even if he gets caught sometimes. I think it's a very valuable super utility player if anyone does go down with an injury. And I think that's something else that needs to be talked about, which is depth. If you have depth in a lineup like the Angels have now, which is also something that's been lacking from them for quite a few years, you can operate from a much higher place. All right, so now last team on our rankings. This is it, and then I guess in the future we're going to be doing. Didn't we talk about this? We're going to be doing power rankings.
Yeah,
next.
we already talked. Yeah, we talked about that. We're going to be doing power rankings following up this video.
Yeah.
Video and podcast. So you can expect to see power rankings starting next week, as soon as next week, maybe even this Thursday for the live stream.
Oh man, that'd be fun. I'm down. You know what? Yeah, I'll have it ready for that. You'll see us there. We'll talk about it there. How things have changed, who's gotten hurt, why things are different. Like
that's interesting.
I'll give a little spoiler. One little thing. It's not going to give away anything. It's that the Rays have impressed me enough where I don't think the Red Sox are in second anymore. I think the Red Sox are going to be in third. But also the Red Sox have impressed me enough. The Blue Jays have shown me that I was right, as if there was any doubt in my mind about that I think it's very clear that there's going to be a separation between the Red Sox and the Blue Jays. Like a win separation. And then there's going to be a much bigger separation between the Blue Jays and the Orioles, mind you. But I think that I think the Rays are still right there. I think that they're still as relevant, at least right now, because they can kind of platoon across the roster if they really have to later on in the season, and at all the positions that they need to, and at all the positions where they don't have to platoon, it's looking like they're getting production. So they're looking just as dangerous as they looked last year for basically the same reasons. But the Red Sox look innumerably better, and the Blue Jays look, just like I've said, like the most overrated team in Major League Baseball. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. 4th place, deal with it. I'm sorry. No chill. Deal with it. 4th place. I've gotten a lot of critique about like, oh, but look at their offense. I have. Like, what do they have? They have 4 guys. That's half a lineup. So, but that is, we'll talk about that on our live stream. We'll grill the Blue Jays on our live stream. So
it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, no, hey, if you want to tell me I'm I'm completely wrong about that, join us there then. Bet, All right, so and I think this is pretty obvious. What team do you think is going to win the National League West? I mean, look, okay, based on who we talked about last week, maybe it's not so obvious, but like, if you watched our last one, right, our last 4th place video or 2nd place video, our 2nd place video for the West. The National League West, actually, their second place team can compete for the division, but we like the Dodgers are the most obnoxious team. Like no one can leave them off. Like I would be shocked if anyone watching this thought that we were going to leave off ranking the Dodgers. Like we'd forget about them. You know, the Dodgers are like the Yankees used to be the prima donna team. You know, now it's very much the Dodgers. You know, it's just a bunch of pretty boys. You know, it's like LA kids. I don't really like that kind of thing. It's not my style. But anyway, the Dodgers won the World Series like a year ago. Okay. They won it with the only roster that they've compiled in recent years that I've really fully approved of. Usually they are lacking in one form or another form with regards to the way that they put together their roster. And such is the case again this year. Instead of saying, hey, we won the World Series last year, let's go out and, get some guys who are really big game players. And let's try and build on that success and win another World Series this year. Instead, they basically went out and said, okay, how can we build a team that's going to do well during the regular season? But when they're in the playoffs, all of the pitchers are going to be in trouble. How can we do that? Like, it's almost as if they actually went through that process. Because here's the deal, okay? Let's just say the Dodgers make it through the playoffs. They make it through the National League, okay? Because the Dodgers, somehow they beat the Padres, okay? And they whoop the rest of the National League, okay? Just because maybe they're on another level. Some people believe that, and they get to the World Series, okay? So first and foremost, Tony Gonsolin's not going to be in the rotation at that point in time, either because they finally determined that he's a reliever, he's gotten hurt, or he's threw so many innings during the season that you have to confine him. If you're putting him out there after going that far above his innings limit during the regular season, you're risking injury. So Gonsolin wouldn't be out there in the rotation. Same thing for Dustin May. Same thing for Urias. So what you're setting up is a situation where the only players that you can put as your playoff rotation, like maybe you put Urias because he's still growing and he's so good and he was great for you in the last playoff. Maybe he's your 4-starter. Okay. But you're still setting yourself up for a World Series where Kershaw's in the rotation and David Price is in the rotation. That's like basically like if you have an elite team you're going up against, that's like giving away 2 victories and then hoping a guy who's pitched too many innings during a regular season, who's a lefty in an era of power hitting righties, is still fresh enough to go your 4th game. I don't think that they can get to the World Series, let alone win the World Series with that group. I think that there are teams like the Padres that are much better set up to beat the best hitters in the game. Like I think Joe Musgrove gives you a much more competitive game in the playoffs than either Price or Kershaw. And like, no disrespect to Kershaw, like my guy, he might be like the best pitcher of our entire era, but it's during the regular season against below average hitters, slightly above average hitters, and like lineups that have bad tendencies. But when you get to the playoffs, you have well-rounded lineups, you have balanced lineups, you have elite hitters. So you can't just pitch to a scouting report, which, mind you, is something that Bauer does. So, and that's another guy I forgot. So yeah, so Bauer, so maybe Urias wouldn't be in the rotation. Maybe it would be Price out of the rotation. But that's the other thing. Bauer does the same deal. Bauer pitches to scouting reports, which is why whenever Bauer gets lit up, it's always when he's pitching to a scouting report and the hitter adjusts, because Bauer's not capable of adjusting back to a hitter who adjusts to him pitching to their scouting report, because Bauer doesn't understand how hitters adjust in those situations. Thankfully, I do. I was a hitter. I study these situations. I study how different types of hitters do adapt and how different hitters can adapt and at what point of their development they are in, so that we know which way they lean. Like it's all very fine because you have to understand a lot of these at bats, you're asking things of yourself, and different approaches allows you to give those things. Say I'm going to ask myself to lay out and catch a ball. Well, if I've never done that before, I'm not going to be able to do it. You know what I mean? So if you're someone with a certain approach and you're doing it all the time, and then you're asking yourself to become more aggressive, what do you think is going to be more effective? Being aggressive from a patient approach or being aggressive from an aggressive approach? So anyway, we could talk about, breaking down approach and fundamentals and player evaluation. And, maybe we can get, John on a future podcast. We could talk about that with him. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
That'd be dope.
Yeah, it would be dope. So anyway, let's jump back in for the Dodgers. Kenley Jansen has looked great this year. It looks like his velocity is back. He's very much like a two-pitch pitcher, cutter guy. I can see him last a while, but the only cutter guy that I've known who's really good in big moments has been Mariano. From what I've seen, most other cutter guys, because you're throwing a pitch the batter knows is coming, batters are able to adjust somehow. It's not like a world-beating cutter. Now, Kenley Jansen is a cutter where he's made his entire career off of it. He started in professional baseball, I believe, as a catcher. And because he has this amazing cutter, was able to become a top scale reliever. But I've never trusted him in big moments. Joe Kelly may be back at some point in time, but I don't trust him in big moments. It's another one of their relievers. Corey Knebel. If Corey Knebel comes back, he walks the world. The guy succeeds against batters who aren't successful at making contact. Guys who just strike out a lot, but not the guys who are necessarily aggressive, but the guys who are patient, work the count, swing and miss. They swing and miss not because they're trying to put themselves on plane with the ball and they can't do it. They're swing and miss because they're trying to work to a mistake pitch. That's why this guy walks so many people, because they're trying to work to a mistake pitch, knowing that he misses the zone. So Knebel's not exactly, against the best arms or bats, super effective with his approach. If he was more of a weak contact guy, or he had a lower strikeout rate or lower walk rate with his elevated strikeout rate, I'd feel differently. But with an elevated walk rate, with not the best contact management, and with the strikeouts being basically his only way of getting by, best hitters don't really cave in like that. You go across their roster. But Trannon could be very good, but he's having a rough start to the year, and I've seen him have consistency issues. He's got really good movement on one of his pitches. I don't know if he's got enough control to throw it as regularly for strikes as he needs to. It just moves so much. Once he gets control of that, he's basically untouchable. But he's already in his 30s, so when's it going to happen? He's got great break on it, great speed, but okay. I need to see it for more than just one season, 3 years ago. Gratterall's beautiful. I love him in the bullpen for them. I think that's probably going to be their main weapon to get guys out. But Gratterall also has an injury history. So I worry about him either being tired from overuse during the season by the playoffs or just hurt, but he's always been like a Jabba Chamberlain 2.0 in my eyes. I think you keep him in the bullpen. You use him very sparingly to start off with, maybe a little bit more as the season goes on, not very much in the last month just to keep him hot. And then the last 3 games of the season, you use him 1 inning each game, just so he's, has feel, that's probably the best way to manage him. But I don't trust Dave Roberts to do that, just to be honest. Dave Roberts is very much he's not worst manager in the game or anything like that. He's definitely decent, but I don't know yet if I would file him in my my clearly above average manager category. Right now, he's just a manager. I think honestly, if I'm being real, he might do better as a bench coach or a third base coach. Third base coaches influence the base running a lot more. Bench coaches influence the team thought process and the team energy a lot more. And I think that he could really be great for either of those roles. I think they just wanted a figurehead, though, to be honest, someone who didn't have as much managerial experience, who the analytics could tell to do different things. Problem is that if you tell a manager to do different things and the players make the adjustments, knowing that the manager's told to have the players execute different things, then you might have a player who's inferior, just with a better process, succeed against a player who's superior. And that will happen when you have a manager, and that type of situation happens routinely for the Yankees. And I've seen it happen routinely for the Dodgers as well. A couple of other teams it happens for. Now, here's the deal. Dave Roberts has been in baseball and coaching for quite some time, and Aaron Boone has not really done this for very long. So I very much see a situation where Aaron Boone can get a lot better in a very short amount of time. The Yankees should be fine, once, he's in, like, say, his fourth year or something like that. And he's also very smart. It's very clear that he knows what he's talking about with ball, but he needs managerial experience. And I think that that's kind of something where you can sometimes get someone who's a bench coach who thinks really good, right? Who's got a great thought process and who's got energy. And you can think, like, this is a great managerial candidate. And it can be for short amounts of time. But what I find is that when you have a manager with that much energy, it can exhaust the club. And I saw it happen with Ron Washington. I mean, I always thought that Ron Washington would have made a much better just third base coach. He was a third base coach for a bit, and just leave him there, he might be back in the game as a third base coach. So he might still be doing it now. He might have gone from being a manager to that right now. Actually, I think he might still be doing that. But I think that's the path that Dave Roberts is on. That, if you take Dave Roberts, in a couple of years, he'll be a third base coach, a really good one, but a third base coach. Victor Gonzalez is very interesting for the Dodgers. He gets lots of ground balls, but the strikeouts have kind of gone away. He's worth monitoring, though, just because when you have a reliever who gets that many ground balls, that's cool. That really helps out. And then outside of that, they have Walker Buehler, total ace, big game ace. And he's the guy that'll really help them get a victory in the playoffs. Big game ace, yeah. He can handle any caliber of hitter. But that's it. So I see lots of issues with the way that they did their rotation. And if I'm being completely fair, like, if they had just kept Kenta Maeda, if they kept Ross Stripling and moved them between rotation and bullpen, if they had, decided to keep Hyun-Jin Ryu, really help them. My goodness, he would really help them. If they had many opportunities to hang on to talented players. And instead, now we have a rotation with Bauer, who pitches to scouting reports, which is not going to help them in the World Series or in the playoffs against elite teams. And they have Kershaw, who blows up in those situations for similar reasons. And you have Price, who, I'm a Yankee fan, and if I remember a lot, okay? The Yankees facing the Rays, the Yankees facing the Red Sox, the Yankees facing Detroit, and anytime I'd go to the game and we were facing any of those teams and I found out that David Price was pitching, I'd basically do a dance because I knew it was 5 runs before the first 2 innings were over, okay? That's David Price against good teams. Okay, so if you're a Dodgers fan and you hear that and that doesn't concern you, I don't know what's wrong with you. And then, of course, Dustin May, he's a fastball only pitcher. It's a cut fastball, so he'll probably be a really good reliever, but he's not a starter. Once he tires out, people learn that they just got to get the bat head out front with him, so the ball doesn't cut on them, and they're not hitting it. Once it's cut and it's in the other batter's box. They're gonna, once they time him up, it's over. There's no differential. There's nothing else that he's using. He's not getting enough swings and misses either. It's just when he does get a swing and miss, it's pretty. It looks pretty because of the movement and speed on his pitch. But also he doesn't have much. He's really wiry to the point where I worry about his ligaments. I worry about how much stress he's putting on his ligaments because there's not enough muscle to hold things together at the velocities that he's throwing.
I was like, where's he going? But that makes sense.
And as a guy with his size, I don't think, without being built up in the minors, that he's going to be able to be successful in the majors over a full year and into the playoffs as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
In the bullpen, he'd be great. Unbelievable. One of the best relievers in the sport. Hader level, Josh Hader level. So yeah, you're a really good reliever, but I don't think he's a starter. Same thing with Gonsolin. I think you'd be a really good reliever, not a starter. So I guess where I'm coming from here is that if this team wants to win the World Series, like you got to take Kershaw out in like the third inning. You got to take David Price out like after the first sign of trouble. You got to like, or if you're using Urias in the rotation, take him out in the third inning so you're not tiring him out or something. Like you got to really bullpen heavy. And it looks like you might have enough to do that, but just. So that's how I feel about the Dodgers pitching. A lot of people talk about like the Dodgers pitching like it's some godsend, like it's better than it's ever been. It's actually worse than it's been in a while, especially in big games. So that's my critique of them there. During the regular season, they will have no problems, though. You face enough average players, slightly above average players, players who stick to their scouting report in all situations, players who are not fully developed with a full process of getting to a point of, swinging at everything to getting to a point of swinging at strikes, guys who have gone from step A to 100, 0 to 100 without learning any of the in between, guys who are just gym rats who swing at strikes. You face enough of those guys these days during the regular season that you can do really well. I mean, people have talked about it. I forget who said it recently that like the big league front offices, they prioritize like velocity over control and command. Like, and I get it, the end numbers, strikeouts are, that's what analytics likes, but the analytics doesn't understand that the step beyond strikeouts is being able to lower your strikeouts, but go more innings by throwing less pitches and getting, outs on grounders, because that's less than 3 pitches. 3 pitches is a strikeout minimum. Most strikeouts take like 5 pitches. If you can get an out on 2 pitches, you're going to make it a lot deeper into your games. Analytics doesn't really look at things that way, Now we learned the other day that front offices in large part, look at the same numbers that we do. They just have bigger and deeper databases and easier ways of sorting the data than what we have working for us. So, if you look at what most analytics say right now is if a guy has high strikeouts, I love him. Fantasy baseball rewards high strikeouts if you're a pitcher and you're getting them, right? But in real life, what's a lot more valuable is a guy who's able to get weak contact, throwing the ball right into the zone. That's where the batter wants the ball. If you're able to throw it in the zone, you're still getting what you want. You're unbeatable. And, eventually it turns into, I'm getting weak contact and I'm throwing in the zone to, oh, I'm getting hard contact and I'm throwing in the zone. Maybe I got to figure something else out. But that's the final development piece where you are so successful that you're not walking people, you're striking out the world, but you want to go deeper into games and your stuff. You can be thrown in the zone, or you're smart enough that you can differentiate in the zone where you'll get that weak contact. So, having these preferences to guys who get strikeouts, that's only when you're part of the way there. You're not at the end part of the process. And I find players that get their success from speed differential rather than control and command and putting your pitches where you want are a lot less successful against the higher levels of competition, especially opposite-handedness, which is why Clayton Kershaw does so great in the regular season. But in the playoffs, he doesn't do so well because everything is about how his curveball's 10 miles an hour off this pitch, which is 10 miles an hour off this pitch. I believe it's like changeup, fastball, and curveball are all 10 miles an hour off of each other. So it's hard to time him. But if you're in the playoffs, right, and you're slowing everything down and you're a righty hitter on his lefty slow breaking pitches into the zone, you're timing it better, what do you think happens? So it's routinely why he blows up. It's also routinely why Bauer blows up. Like I've seen Bauer start off games where he goes like the first like 6 innings and striking out like 12 batters and like, allowing like no runs. And then like within the next inning, he's allowed 2 home runs and like 4 runs to score. He's like throwing his glove and whatnot and, flipping out and whatnot. And I'm like, my dude, that's because people have now seen you 3 times. You're pitching to their scouting report. They're adjusting. You aren't. Why do you think that always happens? Like, I'd love to talk to Bauer I could help him so much because he has everything. He has the skills. He just needs to understand when a hitter changes their approach, what that looks like for each hitter. I have that data. He doesn't. Be a great conversation I can have with him. It would be absolutely fantastic conversation I can have with him. So that's the Dodgers pitching staff. That's their entire pitching staff. With regards to their position players, Will Smith is very much getting jiggy with it. No. The catcher, Will Smith, not to be confused with our Fresh Prince, or not to be confused with the reliever Will Smith, who's also a pretty good player. The catcher Will Smith, I like his intelligence. Okay, he's a guy who clearly, because he knows how people get pitched and he knows how he gets pitched, he realizes, okay, well, first pitch fastball is usually how they go against, patient hitters like me. So what Will Smith does is he has a very high rate of swinging hard, aggressive, great swings on first pitch fastballs. And he gets a lot of homers on those, or has so far. Till I think pitchers are going to start adjusting to this. They're going to start throwing him first pitch breaking balls and things like that. So, but after the first pitch, if he fouls it off or if he swings through it or something, he goes from this aggressive approach to more of a patient approach where he's willing to work the count, not swing at balls, foul pitches off to get to more hittable pitches. And that's how he gets to power later into counts. So he has his early count power from being aggressive on the first pitch. He's got his late count power from fouling pitches off, and he walks, okay? As pitchers learn that he's going to be that aggressive on the first pitch, they're going to get ahead of him. And I think the strikeout rate is going to go up and the walk rate is going to go down. And the power is going to go down too. That being said, we're still looking at like a guy who's going to be like 20% above league average, 25% above league average after the adjustments come against him. And he's about an average catcher. Some people have a bit more issues with him defensively. I'm going to have to watch a little bit more before I say that. I haven't personally seen him be too much of an issue, but I've heard enough that I should watch. Behind him, they got Keibert Ruiz, who top prospect, but very much a polished player, not necessarily a toolsy player, not necessarily a ridiculously ripped, in shape, all of those types of things, right? But he makes so much contact and he plays catcher that they're thinking that they can parlay some of the contact into maybe higher levels of power, like give away some of the contact to hit the ball harder. He's been viewed as one of the top prospects in the sport for a very long time. I haven't been the biggest fan. I just very much view him as Kurt Suzuki, possibly without the level of intelligence. Well, I don't say possibly. Kurt Suzuki's been in the league for like 10 years, 12 years, so definitely without the levels of intelligence that Kurt Suzuki has, but I'm not saying it because I think Keibert Ruiz is dumb. I'm saying it because of experience and the fact that Keibert Ruiz has mainly had to focus on offense, keeping it up through the minor leagues. So they have him behind Will Smith. They have Austin Barnes behind Will Smith, who walks a lot but has no power. So they, that's their catcher situation. It's not the greatest situation. It's also because Will Smith is the type of hitter that he is, patient bat. I think that that's going to cost them versus higher levels of pitching, specifically in the second half, because by the second half of the season, Will Smith will be officially into the period of time where pitchers have adjusted. Like usually you get about a full season's worth of data on a player before you adjust to them. People call it a sophomore slump, but usually it's a seasons of data adjustment slump. Because that happens. Like I've seen sophomore slumps that begin halfway through a year. So I think that we'll see something like that as the season goes on and pitchers know how to pitch him better, that the numbers will fall off. And he won't have accounted for it probably until sometime in 2022, maybe in the first half, if at all, because it's a very hard thing to adjust back to, because he's not exactly a guy who's basing things off of a contact and aggressive standpoint. He's basing it off of having an approach that allows you to maximize on what you're being given. And they're going to be giving him less. They're going to be pitching him harder. So we'll see how that ends up working in the second half for them. Justin Turner is one of my favorite players in the sport. He's been unbelievably successful and consistent at third base. But truth be told, he is getting older. And, while he has had above average ISOs and above average BSRs on a season to season basis, he hasn't really struck out a lot, has walked a lot. So very across the board profile. It is worth noting that his ISOs are almost always right around like 210, which is not too far above 200. It's nice to have an ISO in that range when you're not striking when you're not striking out, when you're walking a lot, when you're hitting for in-play power, when you're doing all of that, you don't need to hit for tons of out-of-play power. You can hit for enough out-of-play power. Mm-hmm. And with the level of contact that he was making, that was more than enough. That was like 30 homer power for that level of contact. But when you start to see a player get older and the power starts to fade, having an ISO that's that close to 200. 200 is a good number. Even 190 is a good number, but you need some other things working for you in order for that to be a good number, to weigh it out. And for a guy who's been so consistently a power hitter, any sort of drop from him is going to take him from a middle of the order guy to either a guy that you're going to use in the 2-hole or a guy that you're probably going to use in the 6-hole. Which is back of the middle of the order. So, whereas if you had like Donaldson drop off, okay, say Donaldson dropped off and, the walks went down, the strikeouts went up, and, some of his ISO went down. Well, he's still probably putting up an ISO above like 220, 230, and that's where I see the difference, because Donaldson has this out of play power level that Turner was just never able to get to. I compare the players. They're very similar. They have a very similar aging. But I've always thought of Donaldson as the more powerful one, and Turner is the one with more hit tool. And I think that at this stage of their career, that will allow Donaldson to keep being the same guy roughly. And I think that that's actually going to hurt Turner. Now, if Turner had 8 other guys that were better than him or 7 other guys that were better than him, you could use lineup protection because he has the hit tool to turn back the years and make him the same guy for years on end. But he's one of the best hitters in their lineup. They're using him right in the middle of their lineup. If you're putting him 7th or something like that, maybe he'd be the same guy. I think, yeah, he would be. And I think, it's possible that he is the same guy that he was last year. But I do think that we are starting to see, he's going to have to do certain things physically to keep up. So I'm not going to say like this is his bad year. No, he'll be fine this year, I think. But I think that you might start to see tendencies that will show whether he's going to fall off in subsequent years. I think this is the year where you'll start to see when you can expect him in the future to fall off. By the end of the year, we'll have the numbers for that. You can quote me on that too. So Corey Seager, one of the best left-handed hitters in all of baseball, is on their team. He'll be a free agent at the end of the year. I am absolutely sure that he's going to go bonkers this year just so he can get a nice big contract, nice big juicy deal. Some people are saying, the Yankees are going to try and get him. Do you realize like the Dodgers don't really have like a shortstop or anything close to like you think the Dodgers are going to actually let Seager go? No, like the Yankees or any team would be stupid to even fight the Dodgers on Seager, because the levels of money that those talks would reach, not appropriate, not okay. And I understand, the Yankees have money, but like, you guys got Stanton, get Stanton off the books before you even think about this. You're going to handcuff yourself again like you did 10 years ago. And then you had to wait, 8 years for that to go away or whatever? I mean, it wasn't 10 years ago, but like, what I mean? In like the early 2000s, they completely handcuffed themselves and they had to wait like 5-8 years until everything expired. And then they were able to operate again. Like, it would be a total shame for the Yankees to waste all of what they have now working for them just so that they could get a couple big name guys like Stanton and Seager. That's ridiculous. But yeah, Seager's, if you look at last year, Seager's expected batting average, expected slugging, like he was just one of the best hitters in the big leagues with like expected outcomes. So I'm just a huge Seager fan. I think he's going to go off this year. Muncy has declined every year since he's been in the league. And, the first time he was really successful was he was very polished. The league didn't know him. And he also was coming into the league with the juiced ball. So I think he's been able to kind of parlay that added to an approach change midway through into a couple of years at the big league level. I think that this year we could start to see really big concerns about him as a regular versus righties and lefties. I think he'll have to be put in a platoon shortly. And if he doesn't pick it up from there, I think you're looking at like a very talented super utility player. But you'll find me on other podcasts from a few years ago saying like I hate Muncy. It's not like I'll be real with you guys. Like I love his attitude. Okay, I love his swag. I love go get the ball out of the water. That whole thing with Mad Bum, where he hits that home run off of Mad Bum and like pimps it out. Mad Bum gets mad at him and he says, "Well, then go get the ball out of the water." That's my type of ball player. He does what he's got to do to win, and I've only seen him do I got mad at him for doing like this one thing that was fairly bush league, but I've only seen him do that thing once, and it was in a really big moment, and it was in a playoff level type situation, and like it wasn't even like super bush league. It was just how you're gonna not try and sell that. You know what I mean? So I think the reason why I actually go harder on Muncy is that he actually came out of nowhere. And then, when he did, and I was like, oh, this guy's not really for real. Add the juiced ball to him coming out of nowhere. He made an approach change and was able to draw out this coming out of nowhere into subsequent seasons. So he's made me look stupid. Okay. He's made me like when I said he's not for real, and then he's drawn it out over a few years. Everybody's like, oh, but you said he wasn't for real. Well, like I said, he drew it out over a few years. The first year was with the juiced ball. Second year, he did an approach change. The third year, he was being platooned more, and his numbers still fell off. Now we're into the fourth year. That's this year. So so I may be right, but it didn't show up exactly entirely in the results in the world we live in. That's all that people care about. So his real life skills may not really be there, but whatever. Point is that at this point in his career, even if he gets put in a platoon, I think you're looking at a pretty valuable player, but only in a platoon, only with lineup protection, only away from the middle of the order. I think he could work probably with Sheldon Noose. But I'm not a fan of, Beatty is a pretty swing, but I'm not a fan of Beatty unless you're playing him every day. He's not going to get played every day. I think Gavin Lux is probably the most overrated player from his prospect class. And I think the only reason why we're talking about him big now is that he's just remained in the minor leagues long enough to put up some pretty good numbers at higher levels. He is a prospect, but he's not a great prospect. He's not an elite tools guy. And then, of course, if you look at the years where you put up the high numbers, the big numbers in the high levels of the minors, that was when the juice ball came to AAA as well. So I'm not really that much of a believer in Gavin Lux. I've heard people say that he has a little bit of a minor version of Chuck Knobloch syndrome. He has trouble making the throw to first, which means he's probably a left fielder. If he's not much of a hitter, I won't say he's not much of a hitter. He's still going to be a hitter. There's no doubt that this guy's going to hit. But I don't think he's a 40% above league average guy. I think you're looking at once he adjusts 20% above league average. And as a left fielder, given what he was expected to be, it's going to be a big disappointment. But they do have Cody Bellinger if he ever comes back from his leg fracture, which happened. So that's an impactful injury. But they have him. I do think he'll be back sometime in the second half. So if not sometime in the second half, when the second half begins, there's just not much of a timetable on him right now because of the type of injury that it is. I'd be shocked if he was out past August, that'd really shock me. So you're still looking at, being able to rely upon him in the playoffs. You're still looking at him being able to get enough at bats in the regular season where he should be heated up by the playoffs. Just don't expect him to give you tons during the regular season. You got Mookie Betts, who's one of the 5 best players in the sport. I mean, he can run, he can catch, he can throw, he can hit for power, he can run the bases, he can walk. I mean, my guy even professionally bowls during the off season. He can roll strikes. So what can Mookie Betts not do? You know, he's a safe bet. Get it? Okay, Chris, you can shoot me now.
It's like
we're on our last 2 players. Just bear with me, okay? We're at the end. We're goodness. All right. So and then lastly, AJ Pollock, who had a big year last year, but I'm not really expecting too much more than like a league average bat plus base running, ability to hit lefties. And you have Chris Taylor, who's like basically their super utility guy. He's on my fantasy baseball team. I like the ability of, you know, playing second, short, outfield. I'm pretty sure you could even put him at third if you wanted to. Not many players can play those positions, can run the bases like he can run the bases, because he's first to third guy, but he can also steal, and also can hit for the levels of in play and out of play power that he can hit for, which is surprising, and can also walk to the levels that he can walk. Like he kind of gives you a little bit of everything. Actually, he can put down a good bunt. He makes decent contact. He's got a pretty decent swing, and he plays everywhere. Yeah, you know what? I think Chris Taylor might be like one of the 5 most underrated guys in the game, come to think of it. Because I don't even think of Chris Taylor like this, but like, what can he not do? You know, like, you know, that meme with the taxidermied like little white monkey. And that's the Dodgers. So I do think that this is a team that during the regular season will absolutely crush. Their only competition are the Padres. And yeah, I think that does it for our divisional breakdowns. Next time we're going to be coming at you with power rankings. We actually got a live stream coming up, don't we?
We do this Thursday. Surprise, surprise. We have decided that moving forward, and this is so everyone knows, you keep track of it, moving forward, we're going to have one podcast episode. We record on Mondays. Episode comes out around Wednesday morning, sometimes even earlier, Tuesday morning. Depends on how much we have to edit. And then we're going to have our live streams on Thursdays. And if you happen to miss it, obviously it's going to be recorded on YouTube. Or also what I'll be doing moving forward is, depending what we talk about, I'll just be converting that video into an audio file and just uploading it to the podcast. So there's still 2 audio podcast productions happening throughout the week. There's just that extra live stream.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about adding something to the newsletter. I don't know if you're on board with it, but we're definitely going to discuss this. I think I'll bring it up here. I was thinking about weekly with the newsletter, throwing, you know, the top 10 of a singular position onto it. And then, you know, next week we do second base, and next week we do left field. Or maybe it doesn't have to be top 10, just the top ranking of each position. Because instead of just having it in one place, that'd be a little bit easier way of slowly releasing it to you guys and getting it out there. Because I am going to have it in one place. Like, don't get me wrong. In the next week or so, it's probably going to be about the next week. I am going to have the full list behind a paywall on saberscouts.com. But I do think that we should tease some of it week by week to you guys. And if you guys really care that much, where like you're going to stick by our newsletter so that like you have the full list and you don't have to pay for it, even though it's only going to be like $5 to access it, then okay, cool. I guess you'll get the full list that way. But I mean, that's if you want to wait. You know, I mean, it's weeks and weeks. I mean, think about how many positions there are, and then you add on pitchers, relief pitchers, and then of course starting pitchers has to be broken down into left-handed starting pitchers, right-handed starting pitchers, left field, right field, center field, super utility, DH. You know, the whole infield. Like, it's going to be a lot of weeks. So if you just want the whole list in general, you know, we'll have it on Saber Scouts. But you know, yeah, I think that we can show you guys little bits, give you guys a little bit of a tease on our weekly newsletter. I think that's something we can do for you.
I think that
I
would
mean,
be good.
I have the list
up
right
to you.
here. I mean, I'm looking at it, so I mean,
Mhm.
it's not like it needs any sort of editing for us to do that with. So I think it'd be better.
I think that would be cool for people to look forward to.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
All right. Well, that's it from me.
that's it from me too. Stay tuned for this Thursday,
We'll see you on the next one.
and we'll see you on the next one. Later.
Peace.